supported processes in the non-proliferation treaty process in the United Nations. We have been supporting financially scientific work on verification on these important mechanisms to keep control. And we will keep pushing at every possible venue the nuclear powers to take responsibility and get back to a process of disarmament. The danger now is that the nuclear powers are pulling out of treaties and they are abandoning the regular negotiations and inspections of nuclear weapons. However, we have seen in the past that in times of very tense international relations, nuclear disarmament could be the first step to get back into dialogue and progress. So I believe we should maintain the hope that that can happen again. There's a special responsibility for the United States and Russia, but also China that has been outside all these agreements. And of course we have to work hard on the NPT to avoid proliferation and new states pursuing the idea of getting nuclear weapons.
Thank you. And the next question goes to the Norwegian broadcaster TV2.
Thank you very much. I'm Stolt Alsnes from TV2 Norway. And my question goes to Mr. Tanaka. Since 1956, Nihon Hidankyo has been working tirelessly against nuclear weapons for an atomic ban, but equally tirelessly for compensation to the Japanese victims of the war. And well, we can say we haven't reached the first topic and not the second one either. But how do you consider the possibilities of getting through some kind of compensation from the Japanese government after receiving the Nobel Peace Prize? And if I may, another question, could you please tell us what was the most memorable moment during your stay in Norway apart from the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony?
Thank you. What we are demanding in regards to state compensation for the damages caused by the atomic bombs and will are being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize this year, I think that things will... Well, I cannot anticipate that there will be any drastic change or large change in regards to this. The state, we have been calling on the state to have compensation for all of the damages caused by the atomic bombings. However, in regards to if there is compensation put in place, this would also bring up questions about compensation for other war victims, for example, as well. And so without having more solidarity between all people who were victimized by the war as well, I think that it is very challenging for our calls for state compensation to be heeded and reflected. However, the damages caused by the nuclear bombs, of course, caused so many tens of thousands of people to be killed as well. There was nothing put in place by the Japanese government in regards to the people who were killed by this. For the survivors, there is, for example, some medical relief, support for their medical treatment and life support as well. But for those people who are killed by the bomb, there is not even any expression or concrete measures or any kind of compensation in place on the part of the Japanese government. They are taking a very sort of hard stance in regards to this. So I don't anticipate that there will be much change, but we will continue to work towards the realization, and this is our determination. Yes, sorry, I forgot to respond to that one. So, how should I say? I really feel that what left the greatest impression on me is... What was it again? I'm trying to remember. Sorry, I'm getting quite elderly. And what I really feel that the whole of Norway has this shared will to abolish nuclear weapons. And I felt this very strong message from the Prime Minister, which gave me great encouragement. So today I was able to feel even more strongly certain about this. And so once we go back to Japan as well, I will share that even for a country that is part of NATO, there is such a strong message about making efforts towards the abolition of nuclear weapons. And so looking at how Japan, as the only country which has experienced the wartime atomic bombings, is just maybe not doing anything about this, I would like to say that it is somewhat embarrassing or almost shameful for Japan not to take more action in regards to leadership for nuclear disarmament. So this is one of the greatest things and which I was very overjoyed about here in Norway.
Thank you. And then the next question comes from the Japanese broadcaster NHK.
Tomita from NHK. I want to ask for Prime Minister, what do you think about the attitude of Japanese government for nuclear weapon?
Well, I paid a visit to Japan 1 year ago, December last year, and I had good discussions with my Japanese colleague. Now there is a new Prime Minister in Japan, and Japan is a country close to Norway. We have, at our NATO summits, had special guests coming from South Korea, Japan, and Australia. They are partners for security in Asia. And I have experienced a large degree of like-mindedness in the approach to nuclear disarmament. And I hope that we can continue, inside different parts of the world, inside the United Nations system, to continue to be a voice for this. And I know that my diplomats working on these issues have special and good relations with the Japanese colleagues.
Thank you. The next question comes from the Norwegian paper Ungdomsavisa.
I'm Tuva Stormoen from Ungdomsavisa, a Norwegian youth paper. My question goes to the Prime Minister. What would you like to say to us, the youth, who are anxious about war and threats of the use of nuclear weapons?
Well, I think youth in my country and in Japan have been anxious about this issue every year. Every generation have had this very serious issue hanging over their head. And I think what we are reminded today is that those who experienced this terrible weapon use in 1945, they have worked for nearly 80 years to spread that message. And I think it is a combination of the message of hope, because the weapon has not been used again. It is called the nuclear taboo. It has to be taboo. It cannot be used. And some say that the value of the nuclear weapon is that it simply exists. But if it is used, it is just going to lead to the total destruction. So what I may say is that young people should keep hope and should find ways of engaging themselves in grassroots movements like we have seen with this year's Nobel laureate. Because what we will need is action at 3 levels. If we start with the grassroots mobilization, which is so important in democracies, that you put things on the agenda, you hold governments accountable, be it on climate change, human rights, and disarmament, then governments also need to engage the scientific community to find ways of doing inspections and verifications and control of weapons and viable ways of reducing weapons. And then at government level, we need to engage the nuclear powers to get to the negotiation table and have meaningful negotiation. Because I believe that nuclear negotiations need to be balanced. There need to be reduction at all levels. So I hope you will find meaningful ways through youth organization, youth political parties, youth movements to engage for disarmament.
Thank you. We are running out of time, so the last question today will go to the Japanese newspaper Asahi Shimbun.
My name is Hanafusa of the Asahi newspaper. I have a question for Mr. Tanaka. And this was a similar question to before, but yesterday in your lecture, there was one sentence which you repeated in regards to state compensation. Yesterday in your lecture, you you emphasized state compensation. So you read this sentence twice in your lecture yesterday. I would like to ask when you decided this and why it was that you emphasized this. Sorry, my hearing is not so great. If you could speak up a little bit more. So we're repeating the question. In the Nobel lecture yesterday, Mr. Tanaka repeated one sentence in his script about state compensation. Would like to ask why it was that he wanted to emphasize this point and when he decided to do so. So the question for me, thank you very much for repeating that. So the reason that I added this, that I repeated this, is as I was speaking, I felt that I needed to repeat, to emphasize this question, looking at what kind of stance, the position that the state takes about the impacts of war on the citizens is an issue for Japan, but for all people. And I think that this is an issue of the relations between the state and the people, no matter where it is in the world in the war. It was on the moment, actually, at the lectern, at the podium, that I decided that I wanted to say this as well. This is something for both a domestic and international issue. So this is why it was a quite spontaneous feeling at the time that I felt I wanted to emphasize this impact or the relations between the state and the people when it comes to bearing the burden of the impacts of war. And so that was why I decided at that time to emphasize and repeat this sentence. Thank you.
So on that note, we need to wrap up this press conference. So now the Prime Minister, the laureates and their delegations will leave the room first. So I will kindly ask the press to wait here until they have left. And please move because they have to pass there. Thank you all for your cooperation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.